I have to admit, I really was clueless. I thought, okay, I'm on a spiritual awakening. I have no idea what that means, but I know I don't feel great because my life was being dismantled. There was a lot of things changing in my life, and there was a lot of uncertainty. The whole journey was not one I was seeking. I can assure you, not consciously. I think my soul, and my spirit knew the bigger picture, but Anne Marie didn't.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who's out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. Today we travel to the UK to talk with Anne Marie Marchant about her book, The Ripple of Awakening, a mighty companion on the spiritual awakening journey. More about that in a second, but first I'd like to invite you to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. Over there you can listen to episodes, read synopses, see photos of my guests, little bio on myself. There's a donate button if you'd like to support the show through Patreon. Thank you very much. There's also a YouTube channel where you can listen. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman, and The Exploding Human Facebook page. As I said, my guest today is Anne Marie Marchant, and she has written a fantastic book about her own spiritual journey, but it's a guide for all of us. And we talk about a powerful moment she had 20-some years ago about a complete and utter surrender that surprised her completely at the time, and she didn't know really what was going on and was very scared about it. And that began a journey for her to explore all kinds of new avenues that she had never thought about before, and how certain spiritual teachers presented themselves to her over the years, and how she has changed her life and become someone that is more present, more living in the moment, and a much happier person. So please listen in. This is Anne Marie Marchant. So great to meet you, Anne Marie. Are you in London?
I'm in Sussex near Brighton, so
Okay.
on the south coast of the UK. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. I'm in the south coast of California.
Slightly different.
Yeah, we're both on the coast. And that's,
We're on the
yeah.
coast.
And we're going to be talking about your book and the spiritual journey and the spiritual awakening. And how did you, let's just start with who you are, because I know because I read your one sheet, but my audience doesn't know, and I don't want to explain something that you can do better than me. And how did we get to this point of writing this such a cool book? And let's just talk about that whole thing when you first started to become aware that there was a spiritual journey for all of us to take.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good point. Yeah, thank you. Well, it really, I mean, to start with, the book is called The Ripple of Awakening, and then A Mighty Companion on the Spiritual Awakening Journey, because for me, this book really is the book that I wanted when I was in the depths of the dark night of the soul, when I had been told I was on a spiritual awakening. By an amazing mentor and friend, probably 20 years ago now. But I have to admit, I really was clueless. I thought, okay, I'm on a spiritual awakening. I have no idea what that means, but I know I don't feel great because my life was being dismantled. There was a lot of things changing in my life, and there was a lot of uncertainty. The whole journey was not one I was seeking. I can assure you, not consciously. I think my soul, and my spirit knew the bigger picture, but Anne Marie didn't. Yeah. So for me, really, it was a gradual journey. And one of the tipping points in my life, which I talk about in the book, is something I call the falling. And it was when my kids were still young, only about 3 or 4 years old. I mean, they're all grown up now in their late 20s, early 30s. And I was not on this path at all. I was in the very much the headless chicken, busy, stressful life, trying to be perfect mum, perfect wife. And I had this experience. I was just standing in my bedroom, and then I had this overwhelming feeling, which is very hard to describe, but it felt like I was about to fall off a cliff or a precipice into a void of nothing, into my death. Now, that sounds quite extreme, but that's how it felt in that moment. And it totally and utterly freaked me out because I hadn't a clue what was happening to me. And it frightened the hell out of me. And I basically screamed out in despair, something like, I don't know the exact words, but, help, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. I kind of pulled myself together, the kids were around, and I felt like a complete weirdo. And I thought, I have no idea what's just happened. And I didn't tell anyone, not a soul. But a few weeks after that experience, the trajectory of my life, unbeknown to me at the time, started to change. And things started to unfold that took me on another journey, shall we say. And that was, I would say, the very beginning of the awakening, even though I was not aware of it. And it was only several years later when I look back and I joined the dots and I thought, oh my goodness, that moment when I screamed out for help, probably the first time I'd ever surrendered completely in my life, I could then start to see the different things that started to come into my life and take me on a new direction into the world of holistic healing, spirituality, that kind of thing. And then that's when things started to change.
That moment that you had in that room it's a really interesting thing for, and I'm going to just say, women raising children, because there's a relentlessness to that. And I've seen my wife go through that too. I mean, she says I have PTSD from raising children. And wanting to be a good mother is such it's a beautiful calling. It's the ultimate service, but it is depleting to, I think, particularly to women, in that it is never ending, even when you're asleep. There's an awareness of sound and the needs of your children. And I think that human beings, we tend to, men kind of do it with work, and women do it with child rearing. And I'm being very general on this. This is not an absolute.
Sure.
But the focus on that stuff becomes so huge that we neglect or don't even look at, or are maybe even unaware that there's something else, that we're here on this planet in this animated form to seek. And if we're not seeking and we're just playing this role, and I guess that's a form of seeking, to be of service to children or whatever, to a family, but that missing piece can hit us. And I think where it hits most people is that 2 a.m, wide awake, I don't know what's wrong, but I can't fall back asleep. And I think a lot of people have that. Do you understand what you know what I'm saying? It's like there's an uncomfortableness to when we don't look at those things, or aren't raised in families that cultivate that kind of a thinking.
20 odd years later, I can actually see that what you're talking about, I was just existing. That's what I would say the difference is now. I truly feel I'm living. I truly feel I'm present. But I had no idea at the time, of course, because like you said, we're very conditioned. We're in a role, and on paper, I had absolutely everything. I had a loving husband, a wonderful home, great kids. My life was good on paper. But for me, there was also under the surface, and I think this is the case for many people, And of course, it looks different. We will have different sort of things that happen in our lives. But I now realize one of the things that had kind of compounded this kind of existing, if you like, was that I'd had some bereavements in my life that I hadn't dealt with, that I just pushed them deeply down because it was too big to deal with.
Sure.
And I think, well, I don't think, I know now that it was like a time bomb waiting to go off. Because I see now, if those emotions and that pain isn't given a voice or held or an opportunity to truly grieve, it has to go somewhere. And, you know, it certainly went deep within in a place I didn't want to look at. So that was part of it, you know, and that's something not at that time as such, but many years later, where I realized I had to start to look deeper at those things that I'd never looked at, basically. Because when I started, after that experience of the falling, when I then went on and through a series of, let's quote, synchronicities, which was divinely guided, but again, I wouldn't have said that at the time, I ended up changing, you know, I was only working part-time at the time, and I ended up changing direction to train to be a holistic therapist and then a hypnotherapist and all that kind of stuff. But what I came to see is that it was about fixing everybody else. The classic ego distraction. Let me look at everybody else, but don't go within. Yeah.
I always wonder about certain people that are healers, that's the case with them. They don't want to look at themselves. But I think a lot of people that become healers are people that have been wounded themselves, and they become healers because they recognize there's an empathic, sympathetic kind of a feeling that, wow, I can help people with this pain because I've been through it. It really is what all the 12-step programs are that, basically, yeah. Which is why they work so powerfully for the people that do them. They, you know, you can talk to somebody who gets it without having to even say anything.
Absolutely.
In a sense. Yeah. So you didn't even tell your husband when this thing happened, this moment?
No.
Wow. That's
I thought
amazing.
I honestly thought I was going crazy. Because you know, Bob, I was a real control freak, but I didn't even know that at the time. And I was also very much, you know, my motto at the time, I can laugh now, but it was all about forward planning. Sure. I was always forward planning. And so, yeah, it was, I did, again, you know, I can see now, but there was a lot of holding on and a lot of control. But under the surface of that is fear, you know, fear to look at myself, fear to go to those places that just felt too hard. So, of course, it just gets pushed aside, and then comes in the distraction, then comes into becoming the doer. And I was very good at being a doer.
When I think about, I get it. And that there's, you know, you don't have to be alone with your own thoughts when you're always doing. And that's because that can be very frightening for people. And sometimes I think, well, what is it when I'm feeling that way? What am I actually afraid of? And it's some sort of a death, some sort of a I'm going to be destroyed if I look at this thing, or if I start crying, I'll never be able to stop, or this is so painful that it'll kill me if I really look at it. And that's not what happens, but that's on a very primitive, visceral level. That's what it feels like, particularly if there is a very, you know, obvious traumatic event. It could be, it doesn't have to be like textbook trauma. It can just it just has to feel like that to the person, you know. Yeah. It could be, you know, something as common as my parent died. It's traumatic for a kid, obviously, abandonment and terror of death. And all the things that could come with that. Now it happens a lot, but
Mm.
nobody wants to talk about it because it could even be, as simple as some perceived rejection that's not even real.
Mm.
Interesting stuff. I don't know if you had events or if you even want to talk about them, but when you say there was bereavement, do you want to get into what that might be?
Yeah,
Or
I mean,
okay,
I am literally an open book. It's all in my book. I hide nothing, because I think, I've healed it now, and I think it's really important to express these things now. So I honestly have no problem at all.
great.
Yeah, I mean, when my son was only a year old, my brother and his partner had just had a baby as well, and their son was a very similar age to my son. But unfortunately, they were tragically both killed in a car accident, my brother and partner. Their son was in the car. He was just, to say, about a year old. So he did survive, but he had frontal brain damage. And they didn't know what quality of life he would have. And of course, he was orphaned overnight. Um, so it was pretty tragic for sure. And and I think also it was bad enough them both dying, but
Mm-hmm.
I think what for me nailed it completely really was they tried a lot to have a baby, and she'd miscarried, I think maybe 4 or 5 times. So this child was very precious and dearly, dearly wanted. So for me, the it just felt so unfair in every single way that child that they'd wanted and loved was they would never see him grow up, and he would never see his parents. So it was big, and my mother was devastated because she'd lost her son. So, and as a family and in that kind of generation, we just didn't deal with emotions. It just, I personally was just not taught how to express those level of
Yeah,
emotions.
sure.
A lot of things were brushed under the carpet as children, and you just were the good girl or the good boy or whatever and just got on with life. So that was when the lid went on the pain, because it was too big. I just could not deal with it. I was literally on survival. That's the only way I could describe it. And having a young child myself, you have to get up every day. You have to, be there. So that was my only focus at the time. And my husband was great and he was supportive. But yeah, literally the only thing at that time that got me out of bed was the fact I had a young son. So yeah, it was very traumatic. There's no doubt about it. And but again, that's when eventually I had to start to address it and look at it, which was not a prospect I relished. But now, my goodness, I am so grateful that I have completely come to peace. I know where they are. I know there is no death in the bigger scheme of things. That's my awareness that we are pure spirit and our spirits are eternal. So, but I couldn't have said that at the time because I was a complete non-believer. I had no faith, no religion. I was black and white, literally. There was nothing, that gave me solace, if you like, nothing bigger, no bigger picture.
Yeah, it's a hard way to go through life, and I've been there myself at times, and I think there was a point I was probably in my 20s when I started to really question. Well, I started as a teenager questioning a lot of things, and then getting really depressed because I didn't really see anything there. And it was a rather cynical view of mankind and of lots of things. But I remember thinking, if I don't figure out a way to do my life, then the cavalry is not coming. No one's coming to rescue me in my inner life. It's just not going to happen. I got to do it myself. And that was it was a great thing to realize, but it certainly didn't solve anything at the time. It just made me feel like, oh no, is there a way to do it?
Mm,
Um, and I did start reading a lot, but I never had something to really grab onto that felt right to me.
yes.
So
Yeah.
that was a tough thing because religion didn't really do it, and I didn't have a mentor of any kind that's really spoke to me. I'm not a big guru guy. I just
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, that's just Larry. He doesn't know anything more than I do, you know.
Yeah.
I just picked a name, but so that sort of feeling of what is there and how do I get a piece of it or tap into it is I think is the human dilemma, and then we're all looking for it.
It's unspoken, isn't it, really? Well, that was certainly my experience. But I think what I've seen now is that, like you, obviously, there was part of you thinking, well, we start to question, don't we? Is this it? Is there something else? Is there a bigger picture? Why are we here? And I think for some, they don't go any further than that. But I think if there's a deep desire, then I have great awareness now that the universe does listen. And we have to, and I think for me, like that call for help, that I was heard. There was no doubt. But I think what I've seen is that the level of surrender that we have to get to, so like we almost have to get out of our own way, and that's when, again, universe, God, source, whatever you want to call it, can come in. And I'm sure most of us have heard the term ask and it is given. As I say, these things that started to line up, I could not have orchestrated them. I really couldn't. And that now absolutely blows me away.
What are some of the things that lined up that now that you look back, you went, oh, that's why that happened, and then that, and then that?
After that event that I told you about, I mean, it was literally only a few weeks later that I was looking through the local paper and just looking at the evening classes at the local college. And I just thought it would be quite nice to do something. I didn't know what, because my kids were getting a bit older, and I thought, oh, I might be able to go out the odd evening. And this course I saw, it was about, I can't remember the title of it, but it was about an introduction to holistic therapies and alternative complementary therapies. And I knew zero, I knew nothing. But I kind of thought, oh, that sounds quite interesting. And it was a 6-week course. It was 2 hours a week. And I thought I can manage that. And it wasn't to gain any qualifications. It was just sort of, as I say, an introduction.
Yeah.
So I went along, and my goodness, I sat there after the first class, and I thought, oh my God, there is another way. And it was like, I can't explain it. It was like, I felt like that there was a secret world that I'd never knew about that had been hidden. And now it was like a doorway had opened. And I was so like into it. And the guy, the teacher, I never forget him. He was quite a wild bohemian kind of guy with a crumpled suit and crazy hair. And, he ruffled a few feathers, but I loved him. And I was so keen every week to go to his classes. And I remember thinking, how does he know this stuff? And I thought, I want to be in his head, because he inspired me so much. And so I completed that 6 weeks, and then I went on to do more of his stuff. He was doing one on vibrational healing, on NLP, and all of this. I knew nothing. I mean, I was as green as they come. But I thought, wow, and I did all of his evening classes. And then literally a year later, I was looking in the papers again, and the page literally fell open. And on the page, there was a course, a full-time course at the same college, but this time it was to train to be a holistic therapist. And I thought, wow, I could work in this field. And I was just like, oh my goodness. It was like every cell of my being thought, I want to do this. And so then I started to train in those modalities. So going back to college, so I remember my brain literally hurting to start with because I was still studying again. And I was just hungry for it. And I completed that. And then I went on and I trained in massage therapy and then eventually the NLP, which I was fascinated by with what that guy had shown me, because I was fascinated with the mind. And then hypnotherapy came. So everything just took me in this new direction. And of course, I was meeting different people. And some of them were what I would call spiritual, although, as I said, I didn't really know what that meant. And they were talking about all this kind of woo-woo stuff and things I had no idea about.
Sure. Yeah.
And I wasn't that interested to start with, but it again, it took me in different directions. One of the friends I'd met, she was working in a health food shop, and I went there and I met the owner, and I ended up doing a psychic development course there, which I had no idea what even that meant. But it's just like the universe just kept bringing me these opportunities, and I just said yes. I was completely clueless, really. I just said yes, and so that opened my mind to a whole new realm of things, and I was, I was very much one of those people that was like, I have to see it before I believe it. And so the experiences I started to have, I couldn't deny what I was feeling. And so the universe knew the way to kind of help me to wake up, shall we say. And then it just even more, then I ended up meeting another lady after that, a lady called Sarah, who that was a point where I suppose was the time when she was the one that actually told me I was having a spiritual awakening. And by this point, I was in a lot of pain, emotional pain. And then I realized that inner healing has to happen now. And she was a very big part of that.
Yeah, it's interesting, the people that intersect with us and when we're ready to see it. I always wonder how many of those great people I missed early on, where I went, I'm not doing that. And then but I don't spend a lot of time on that. But then when you're ready, and that happens, you're like, just the idea that there's all this information and another way to look at the world that you weren't taught is a phenomenal gift to see it. And it is a little mind blowing. It's like, what? Everything I've been told is a lie? Not everything. I'm exaggerating, but there's a lot of things that are just not the way that conventional thinking promotes correctly. I had a real interesting thing. When you were talking about vibrational healing, and I'm going to be doing an episode on another episode on sound and solfeggio and binaural beats. But I started to get into these binaural beats, these frequencies that are healing frequencies. And so when I have a sore neck from I don't know why. I did something. So I looked up binaural beats neck pain, and I put it on just on YouTube, and I laid down and I meditated and let this sound, and I got up and the pain was gone. Now it did come back after I started moving around a lot, but it showed me something, and I've had this in a million different issues, and I used this stuff to really help me. I was getting sick, and I put on binaural beats flu, and that actually did go away, and it did not progress. So does it sound like crazy and woo woo and non-medical? Yeah, it does sound that way. It does, but it worked.
Exactly.
So tell me some of the important, well, they're all important, the chapters in your book that you would recommend people to really take a look at to kind of see what some of the possibilities are for people like us who were skeptics.
I mean, it's interesting. I read a review actually the other day about the book, and I thought, that's actually really interesting. And it was saying it's actually a book of two stories or two parts. And I thought, it is actually. And it's part of it is about my own experience. Although when I started writing the book, I was adamant it wasn't going to be about me. I thought, no, I don't want it to be about me. I want it, about the bigger picture of the spiritual awakening. But it was like I couldn't not write it. There was something that just couldn't not, bring that to the pages. And actually, since people, have read it, they said, Anne-Marie, they're the bits that I really resonate with because it's your story and I relate, I connect to what you're saying. And it's real and it's raw. I don't pretty it up because it wasn't pretty. There were times when it was not. And I don't want to paint this picture of it's all pink and fluffy because it wasn't for me. And for many people, it isn't, because you do hit the dark night of the soul, because it's like your whole world, your whole identity as a body, as a person, is being dismantled because we're starting to see who we really are beyond the body. So it brings in, my journey, as it were, the highs and the lows, and then the eventual coming to know myself and coming to a place of sustained peace and joy. But it also weaves in there the commonalities and the themes and the stages and phases of an awakening. So I interviewed people who'd, also had these similar experiences because I wanted to, to bring in those commonalities and stages. And there are definite themes that it's not, it looks different, but the phases and stages are very similar. And I include the interviews at the back of the book because I think it's really important to see, because not everyone's journey is going to look the same, you see. It's not, and that's the thing. It's like, I wanted it to be accessible so people can say, oh, okay, I can relate to that. And that's happened to me. And, oh, is that why I feel like this? I'm not going crazy. Because I certainly thought I was going crazy. I want to take your hand and let's walk together. And that's why this sort of subheading is a mighty companion on the spiritual awakening journey, because I think we need that.
Yeah.
We need someone to walk by our side when we think we just have lost a plot, because it's a frightening place, and you get kind of peaks and troughs. I get to certain phases and I think, wow, I think I'm there, whatever that means, and then exactly. Bam, bam, and wherever I think that is, or the ego. It's definitely the ego that thinks this. And I actually talk quite a lot about the ego versus our true self, our true essence, our true spirit, which helps us to kind of identify with what is then a spiritual awakening. It's like, if we're true spirit, that's our true identity. And when we can start to see what that is, it helps us to kind of negotiate the journey, I would say, a little easier, because I certainly highlight the fear side, the ego side, that side, that voice that always wants to put you down, or, those judgments in your head, or I'm not good enough, or all this stuff, and exposing that, because we don't have to live like that. We don't have to have that voice always, but it's part of it is learning how to see and listen. Which voice do I want to listen to? Do I want to listen to love, to joy, and all of those beautiful energies from source, if you like? Or am I going to listen to this ego downer all the time? And for me, that's a big part of the journey. It's a massive part.
Well, what you're really talking about is a choice in perspective, and what we want to look at becomes the reality and becomes the important thing. That was actually what I was thinking about while you were talking, is what are the things that you do today to sustain this? It's not new for you now, but this new awareness that transpired. What are the things you do in your life to keep you on that perspective that is so valuable?
We do have to do the inner work. We do have to clear the baggage, because if we don't, we're never going to be able to feel that level of freedom. So I think we have to be prepared, first of all, to look within. I suppose I'm at the point now where, prayer, meditation, I have built a relationship now with, quote, the God of my understanding. That isn't a religious God. It's an all-loving, encompassing presence, which in itself, that was a massive journey to understand that relationship and build that relationship. Because that's really it. That's the simplicity. When I know now when I'm in, quote, love with a capital L, i.e. connected to source. And I know now when I'm in the ego, the fear. And really that's the daily awareness of watching the mind. I have a very simple life. I trust in the universe to provide everything. And basically the love that I've experienced, if you like, is you can't explain that to someone. You have to experience it and feel it. And so I think that's why the inner work is so essential. And then we can open up to hearing and feeling this true energy, which we all have access to. I had an experience where I remember having a real big tantrum to God when I was learning to connect with God. And as a kid, I was a good girl. I never had tantrums. So I was learning to express and I was learning to let my anger out. And I remember having this tantrum from hell to God. And I didn't hold back. I let rip. And then eventually I just crumpled to the ground and I sobbed and I sobbed. And eventually when I stopped crying and I sat up, the love that I felt, I can't even express it. And I said to God, I said, you still love me, don't you? After everything I've just said, everything I've just expressed, you still love me. And I felt it with every cell of my being. And since that day, I've never doubted that I'm loved. I forget, and I push it away, but I know that is there all the time. So practicing to be present and in the now is, I'd say, the biggest kind of daily way of living.
That was beautiful. I didn't even want to talk after that. I just wanted to sit here, but I have to talk because I have a podcast. Okay, I have two questions. I'm going backwards just a little bit. What was the rumpled suit guy's name? I'm so curious.
Yeah, his name was Ian McDonald. I think he's passed now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I just had to know it. I had to know it.
Yeah. I mean, I thank him. He will never know. I put my hands together in prayer. He will never know how he changed my life. But so grateful.
I wonder where he discovered all this stuff. If he had, sometimes people in families have, like, for instance, your children and grandchildren will have a source of this kind of thinking from you. That's going to, whether it's, overt or it's just being around her gave me this other way of being. You're going to be that person. I wonder if Ian had somebody like that, or he just, that's really interesting stuff to me. Sometimes when you talk to people that are psychic, they'll tell you that, oh yeah, my grandmother was a psychic and she taught me how to do this stuff. You'll hear those kinds of things. So the thing that you're offering, the people around you is enormous. What a gift that you're giving to other people.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. And I also want to know what happened to your brother's little boy.
Yeah, he was adopted by his aunt and uncle in Paris.
Oh.
They already had 3 young boys, and funnily enough, they were going to adopt a child. They already had 3 of their own children. So it's amazing, it was kind of written in the stars, I think. They did an amazing job. 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 They did an amazing with him, and I'm again eternally grateful for them taking him on in such an amazing way. So
wow, so he's like 30 today.
31 now. Yeah, my
Yeah.
son's 31, so they're yeah.
Well, that went fast.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it. There's the journey. Well, hey,
Yeah.
yeah, massive,
It's
massive.
amazing how fast when you're in it and you're raising children, it seems, the daily stuff seems relentless and very tiring. And is this ever going to, not be so demanding? And then all of a sudden it's just done. And you're like, wow, that went fast.
Mm,
I have those thoughts all the time. And my
yeah,
kids are all grown too. So I'm kind
sure.
of like, wow. Um,
Yeah.
so
Well, I think that's why, I remember it very early on, probably before I went on the journey. I remember reading this quote, or maybe it was in the early days, and it really stopped me in my tracks. And it was, how many now moments have you missed?
yeah,
And I
yeah,
and I stood there and I thought, oh my God, so many. And that it literally was like a punch in the face, to be honest. It really stopped me. And I thought, whoa, it helped me to see how unpresent I was. It's because I said to you, I was always a forward planner.
yeah.
And it's things like that, if we can be present, and that's a practice in itself, just being willing to try that. And then we can appreciate our loved ones. We can appreciate a sunny morning, a walk in the park, kicking up leaves. I never take those things for granted anymore. And they, at times, have brought me to my knees with just utter gratitude. And, all of that used to pass me by, really.
Sure.
But it doesn't anymore.
The idea of constant accomplishment is way overrated. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's it's what do they call it? The race to nowhere.
Yeah.
When I get X, Y, and Z, then I can relax and be okay. And then that time never comes because it's already here. And so I was talking, somebody called me the other day and they were saying, oh, I was talking to this other guy and he felt like he was wanting to get me off the phone. And I said, oh, I know him. He's always ahead. He's on to the next thing. It's so very, very, very rarely do I, get to just be with this person because that's who they are. They're ahead.
Heard it called, destination addiction. We're addicted to the destination, and that term, I'll be happy when. Be here now. This is it. This is it. And it is honestly, it's the only place you can connect to your true source. It isn't 2 seconds ago or in 2 seconds. It's now. And what I've seen, the ego's trick is it wants you on the timeline. It wants you in the past and the future, because then you can't be in the present.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that is it. That is the work now for me is to notice when I go off, and I can spot it a lot quicker, and I don't give myself a hard time anymore like I used to. I used to feel really guilty about that and think, oh my God, So it's even watching that, when the ego wants to make you feel guilty.
Yeah. What an interesting creature the human being is, that we're sort of, we land here on Earth with these obstacles that we spend our whole lives trying to overcome them, or at least put them in the right perspective. I think that's really more of it. It's not really so much about getting rid of as altering the percentages. So we're still human on the sort of human primal plane, because we're stuck with that until we die. And then also the other plane of the spiritual plane. So it's a really interesting dilemma that we face. And that's and I think if you don't have what you refer to as the dark night of the soul, you're not gonna get to the spiritual place. I think that's part of the thing. I don't know if there's people that are just born at a place where you've arrived now. I think youth and inexperience and hormones really take us down some crazy paths.
I do know of someone who hasn't had dark nights of the soul and has come in as a pretty much sorted person, and actually at a very quite a young age, she was only, I think, 13, she actually had a dream, and she actually went to the light and met Jesus. And she didn't even know who Jesus was then. And she said from that day, she never, ever felt alone, and she always knew she was loved. A couple of years later, she then met a mentor. Again, she wasn't looking for it. So, and she is honestly one of the happiest people I know. She just is. And so there are some people that come in, and I think, maybe they've had other lifetimes where they've had to do a lot of work, and now she's coming in and thinking, well, hey, here we go. We're going to have a good one this time. We're not going to have all the heaviness.
I actually do have a friend like that. She had sort of a somewhat difficult early childhood, but then she had the exact same experience. She's definitely one of the happiest people I've ever met, and been a great friend, and not a negative, dark person at all. Doesn't really have the dark side that a lot of us have. So I guess you're right. There are people like that.
I think there are. Yeah.
So you either are that or you have to become it. So
yeah, we've all got that in us. You see, that's the wonderful thing. And I know for myself, to see way showers and to see people who, in my eyes, are quote normal, like my mentor that I met, Sarah, that I was telling you about, she was living what I quote would say a normal life, but in an extraordinary way. And I thought, because when I heard about this spiritual awakening thing, I thought, well, surely that means you have to go and meditate on some mountain somewhere, or, go to a hermitage and lock yourself away forever. And I thought, I don't want that. Thank you very much. And then I realized, oh, no, you don't have to. And so again, the universe brought me the perfect person to demonstrate how to live like that. And she demonstrated it. And so I think the right people come in to show us and to help us. Yeah. And I've been so blessed to meet many people like that have inspired me, and, and I still meet them. And I certainly, don't want a guru or need a guru, because we're all the same. And I think I've been very lucky that the people I've met have never been those kind of gurus, and they've always inspired me to say, it's in you, Anne-Marie. And the job of a good spiritual teacher is that you don't need them eventually, because that's when they've done their job, Sure. They set you free. They give you the wings to fly and to trust your inner guidance, your intuition. And so that's one thing, again, I talk about in the book. It's all about helping people to realize it's within them, without exception. There is no exception.
Let's plug your book before we head off into your evening and my day. I know it's on O-Books, o-books.com out of the UK, but let's say the title and maybe some other places people can get the book.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, it's called The Ripple of Awakening, and a mighty companion on the spiritual awakening journey. And in the UK, it's going to be on Amazon as from the 9th of December, and in all good bookshops. And in the States, it's from the 1st of January. You can get it on Amazon and in bookshops as well, and ebook. Perfect
timing to do this podcast. I'm so glad that we're going to have this up and running before the book's out. So that'll be fantastic. Thank you so much for being on here, and I feel blessed to have been able to talk to you today.
Likewise. Thank you.
Good luck. Yeah. Good luck on the book, and continued blessings on your journey to wherever we're going.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Bob. I really appreciate the opportunity, and what a wonderful job you have to be able to speak to so many people and share all this.
It's fantastic. I love it. I love it. I am meeting the greatest people of my lifetime doing this thing. There's a lot of people that are seeking wonderful things, and I want to give them the opportunity to check in here and find those things. And you're certainly one of them.
Oh, bless you. Well, amen to that.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah, the ripple is going out.
The
So
ripple
this is,
is, yes.
oh yes, and that's what it's about.
Have a beautiful day. Thank you.
Thanks ever so much, Bob.
Much appreciation for you folks listening in to The Exploding Human. Check out the website, theexplodinghuman.com, the YouTube channel, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman, and the Exploding Human Facebook page. I want to thank Anne-Marie Marchant once again for a wonderful, wonderful talk. I hope that you guys get her book. It offers powerful insight into not only her spiritual journey, but the one that you might be on. Thank you so much. Have a great day.